the coolest thing about Restore is that there really is not there's no like off session. Like every single session is a keynote speaker. Like we decided in the beginning, and I mean, we'll see how this plays out in the years to come, but we decided we're just going to keep everybody together because there's not a session to miss. If you had to choose between two, like, I don't know how you would pick between two people. And so we just do it. You're in the same room all together, and every session is a home run. So that's a really special thing. Like, there, from the very beginning, there's not a session to miss.
Welcome back to That's Church. I'm Ashley, here with my sister Emily. We're Mormon women exploring various religions and spiritualities. Join us.
Aubrey received her bachelor's in elementary education from Utah State University and taught 4th grade in Springville, Utah. She married her high school sweetheart, and together they have 4 children ranging in ages from 6 to 15. She and her husband Tim serve on the executive board of the Faith Matters Foundation and co-host the weekly podcast, where they aim to create a space for expansive, thoughtful conversation within the restored gospel. We are so thrilled to have Aubrey on the show today. She, along with her husband Tim and the Faith Matters organization, are hosting an incredible gathering called Restore. This event promises to be a transformative experience featuring a lineup of amazing speakers and discussions. Be sure to listen to the end of our podcast as she explains a lot about what the speakers will be talking about, and really motivated me and got me so excited to go. Tickets are on sale now and will be available until September 7th, so be sure to grab yours as soon as possible. And here's our special treat for our listeners. You can get 20% off by using our code THAT'Schurch at checkout, but also Faith Matters is committed to making this event accessible to everyone. So if cost is a barrier, they have scholarships available thanks to some generous sponsors. If you or someone you know could benefit from this assistance, simply reach out to them through their contact information on the website faithmatters.org. They truly want everyone who needs or wants to attend to have the opportunity to do so. Again, make sure you listen to the second half, as there is some great information, and Aubrey also answers a lot of questions that I know I had about the conference as well. We are so happy to have Aubrey Chaves here with us today. Thank you so much, Aubrey.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you are just amazing. We look up to you so much, and we're just really looking forward to this conversation.
That's so kind. Thanks.
Yeah. On that vein, you are so absolutely incredible and so strong. And I think somebody that so many people look up to. And I think it's so nice to have people that you look up to and people that you admire to share also their struggles. And I know that you've had some moments of deconstruction within your faith and reconstruction, and a lot of struggles throughout that. And so I'd love for our listeners to hear how that went for you.
Well, thank you so much. That's really, it is just so kind. And I feel like a lot of times, on the podcast, it kind of feels like I'm bearing my soul a little bit, like asking these things that really disturbed me or like actively causing me some pain. And so that really means so much, because I feel so connected every time I find out that someone has listened to the podcast and had the same questions. Like, it just feels like, even though we don't necessarily have an answer, it's just, there's something so healing about knowing that somebody else has the same pain. So I really so appreciate that that's how you started. So thank you. And yeah, so I grew up with like the happiest village. I think that I couldn't have asked for a better experience growing up in the church. I had so many amazing adults who knew my name and knew what I loved and seemed to just genuinely care about who I am in my life. And they kept track of me, and they were just like the cream of the crop. I really think I have nothing negative to say about that experience growing up in my neighborhood in the church. And I know that that's not everybody's experience, but that has not disturbed me. Like, I had great bishops and young women leaders, and I feel so grateful for the way they sort of held me as a child and as a young woman. And I felt like my whole life revolved around the church in a good way. It was like, it was an anchor, and it was very healthy scaffolding for me. and it oriented everything in my whole life. And I think I can say that that was true for Tim too. And so in a lot of ways our life was very simple, and getting married was very simple because we had all the answers and we had all the same answers. And so it was easy. It was very easy. And maybe 2 or 3 years after we got married, Tim, in a in an honest effort to understand some of the questions and critiques that he had heard about the church, he read Rough Stone Rolling by Richard Bushman, and his world kind of fell apart. I think it really scared him to be reading about church history that was totally unfamiliar to either of us from someone who was not a critic. Like this is somebody from inside the church who's all in, and it was scary to not be able to dismiss the stories that were disturbing as something like anti-Mormon, which I think was kind of the narrative that we grew up with. If it doesn't make sense, then it must not be true. And so he told me one day, just out of the blue, he said, he sort of confessed that he wasn't sure that he had a testimony anymore. And it was a really destabilizing moment for me because I do think I have, just maybe it's a personality thing. I have this tendency to really defer to authority and to kind of people please. And so I think I had struggled for a long time with just this feeling of like not being very anchored in a sense of self. I'm not sure I really knew a lot for sure on my own, but I really cared about doing the right thing. And so I really looked to people around me to just assure me like this is what you should do. And I was a very good soldier. And so I think what happened when Tim sort of opened up about his questions is that I had to sort of face the fact that I had a lot of questions that I had really stacked up on the proverbial shelf. And Tim had kind of been my anchor. I trusted and loved him so much, and I knew that he knew. And so that was enough to sort of keep my questions at bay. And I genuinely thought that the questions were wrong. Like if I had enough faith, if I was worthy, I wouldn't have these questions. Like I would be able to trust. And so all of it came crashing down when this person who I had so much respect for and trusted so much sort of admitted that he had all these questions too. And it was just, there wasn't enough strength to like hold them back anymore. And so the gift of that was that we were both in faith crisis immediately. Like we were both sort of free falling at that point. And it was just awful. It was just really scary. It was really hard. And there was a lot of shame because my life view at that point was that you could earn certainty. And so this must have been about a lack of obedience or a lack of real intent or a lack of faith. Like I just couldn't figure out how to earn it all back, but I was sure that it was something I was doing wrong. And so we sort of spiraled in this, both of us, in this really uncomfortable place of just feeling like we can't talk about this. It's like it feels like a sin, like it feels like we're doing something bad, but also there's just this terror. There's this constant terror about, what it means for our life. And we felt completely adrift and scared. And it was truly like the dark night of the soul. It was terrifying. And so that was the beginning. And that was, this is around 2010, 2011. And out of desperation in those years, we started just looking for anyone who was talking about this because we felt a little bit crazy. Like we like it felt like, where are the people wondering these same things? And so we found podcasts in those early days where these conversations were happening, and those were really a lifeline for a while because it was a way we could sort of listen anonymously and hear bigger conversations happening, and also be exposed to people who were a little bit farther along in their journeys, who weren't feeling the sense of panic that we felt. And that all by itself was so therapeutic. Like, this is how we can talk about testimony without shame, and this is how we can talk about doubt without shame. And I just heard people doing that over and over and didn't really get any answers, I don't think, but I think it was so healing to just sort of feel mentored in those years and see people move through doubt in a way that I didn't understand at all. And as the years went by and I learned about stages of faith, everything sort of started making sense, and the uncertainty stopped seeming quite so threatening. But I think it was that desperation that sort of eventually led us to find Faith Matters. And at that time, Terrell Givens was who we were really big fans of Terrell and Fiona. And Terrell was hosting a podcast called Conversations with Terrell Givens, and he was doing it. He was sponsored by this Faith Matters Foundation, and we didn't know what it was. But it was, I just loved everything that Terrell and Fiona were doing, and so I was listening to that. And finally, we just reached out because what it felt like we were missing was it just people. I just wanted to sit in a room with people, with real people, and know that we were having the same we were on an unusual journey. It felt like an unusual journey, and I felt like such an outsider in my Sunday school class, and I just wanted to be with people who were doing something that I was doing without feeling like I was so isolated. And so we reached out to Faith Matters to just say, please, can we help you? We don't even care. Just like let us be in the room with you, And thankfully they needed a lot of help. And so that's how we got involved. And it's been such an incredible experience. We're going on like 5 or 6 years, I think.
Wow.
Just like having these conversations with people who are interested in expansive faith journeys, and it's been so healing to just reframe all of this dread and anxiety about uncertainty as this opportunity for growth and curiosity and expansion. And I feel like that's been what this experience has revealed to us over and over again, that this is such healthy, fruitful growth. And there's I feel like there's so much more capacity now for connection that my shame really hid me from for a lot of years.
Wow. That is, I love so much that we're touching on this because I think it's so important for people. I mean, you said that this happened in like 2010 for you, but it's happening for people every single day. And I think it's just so important for people to know, like, you're not alone in this, because it can feel, I feel like sometimes at church we put on the mask of like perfection or like, and my favorite moments in church are when the mask comes off and we're just vulnerable and real with each other, because that's where the like connection is made, and where we can feel like we're bonding. And so I just love so much that you said that, because it is such an isolating place when you're going through a faith deconstruction, or crisis, or there's so many different words for it, but I think that it's just the different levels that you're in, right? But no, I remember telling my bishop, like after I had taken about a 3-month break, I said to him, I think everyone should do this. He looked at me like I was crazy, and I was like, because it made me come back to it with fresh eyes, and it made me see what was important to me in our church, and maybe some of the things that aren't as important to me. And I think if everyone did that, it might be better for everyone. Maybe it's just me, but but like, I don't know, it feels similar that you needed to, and again, maybe you didn't like take a break like that or something, but like finding community, finding people that you can trust with those things, because unfortunately there are a lot of people who don't, and maybe they just don't have the capacity right then to hear or have those conversations, and that's okay. But that's why it's so important to have communities, like Faith Matters. Like, that is such a huge resource. There are so many people
Oh,
that it's helping, and so you're doing
that's so
amazing
great to
work.
hear. Thank you. Yeah, that's so great to hear. I think I've learned that, yeah, some if it's like you would never choose it, but when it if you find yourself in faith crisis, I think maybe that was actually what was disturbing to me, is that it felt so out of my control. It felt like I kind of it felt like a sickness. It felt like something that was happening to me, and I couldn't push it away, and it was really scary. And I think when that's the opportunity that flows into your life, then it probably means that it's exactly what your soul needs. And I genuinely believe that there are some people who just aren't going to have that experience, and their lives will be just as fruitful spiritually. And it's kind of, I think that's the best thing that could happen in our community, that we could have some people for whom the gospel feels really simple and stays really simple. And then you're going to have other people who it feels like the world's falling apart and they don't know if they believe anything. And you're sitting in the same room at Sunday school and planning, funeral food together. And there is something so incredibly stretching and beautiful about the kind of friction that happens when two people are genuinely right. That like the gospel is totally working in its simplicity for one person, and the gospel is causing havoc in another life, and has become this real catalyst for a total reorientation. in the person sitting next to them. Like I think that's it. That's one of the serious gifts of community, that it's like your heart constantly has to be wrenched open because we're just genuinely having different experiences, and they're both producing fruit that is good. So it's complicated. I think it's really complicated, but it's a gift.
Yeah. And I think everyone needs something different when they're in that stage, a little bit at least. We interviewed somebody that that is a BYU graduate, and she did her thesis on LDS members that struggle in the church but stay in the church. And one of the biggest reasons they stay in the church is, one, to help other people that are struggling, and to be in community with people. And so I love that you said, like, you wanted to be around people, like actually in the room with people. I think that is so valuable for most people. And I think sometimes people need to read a lot of books, and sometimes people need to have a friend that just can listen to them. Like, I think those are the main things that are most important. And sometimes people need to take a break from church. And, I think there's different times of life too, or different times within the struggle, that you need different things as well. And I love that you said, again, being with people. I think for us, I was going through a struggle when we started this podcast. And this is kind of what I did to remedy it, was I was like, I want to understand more about other people's religions and like expand my mind in that way. And it has been so valuable. And now I'm so excited to sit with people that are like-minded in the same type of struggle, which is why I'm so excited for the Restore conference. We didn't get to go last year. We wanted to, and the timing just didn't work out. And we've never been before. So
I'm glad you'll
we
be there.
are so excited.
So excited.
Yeah.
We've heard such amazing things. And we actually did a meet and greet after Restore one time. The timing just worked out right after. And
which is even worse. We're like, they're all talking about what we missed. I'm like,
yeah.
I'm like, we are for sure going next year.
Yeah, it was so amazing to hear all about it. But and it made us even more excited to attend this year. So we can't wait. But before we get to that, I do want to know how you went from kind of just being part of Faith Matters and being in the room with the people to becoming the host of the podcast. Was the podcast in existence before you were the host, or did it start with you?
Well, Terrell was hosting what became the podcast.
Okay.
But what we were hearing from people is that they wanted Terrell to be on the other side of the microphone. They wanted him to, or the other side of the interview. They wanted him to be interviewed and to be responding to his own questions. And he was also getting pulled in a lot of different directions. And so it just happened very slowly, actually, that we would step in to help and interview people like Terrell. And then just kind of what I feel like what happened is that a lot of people resonated with hearing their questions asked. And I think our angst must have been close to the surface, because I think people could tell that these questions for us were very alive. And in a way, I think that I don't know, it was very healing for us, but I think the healing was sort of flowing both ways, especially in those early days. Like they were hard questions, and they were questions that were really really active in our life and like causing a lot of pain still. And so it just kind of felt like that's what the podcast was meant to be. And people like Terrell became the mentors and the guests, and he comes on the podcast still often to just offer insights. And it felt like that was really what was resonating. And it felt like I felt like I had a lot of energy in this place too. Like it was so healing to do the opposite of what my anxiety demanded, which was to never ask the questions. Like, just put it away, like sweep it under the rug, move on, like deal with your feelings and distract yourself, and the podcast has been this incredible opportunity to do the opposite and to just like scan for what is hurting and try to articulate it as particularly as possible. And that experience all by itself, no matter what comes next, like whatever, no matter what comes after the question, just that practice of trying to isolate and articulate pain has been the most healing experience of my life. And so I feel like once I got a little taste of that, it felt like, okay, there is something here. Like, I don't know what this is doing for my soul, but like, I want to keep practicing doing this thing that I didn't learn to do, which is acknowledge and validate and speak the pain out loud. And it's just, it's a cathartic experience. And I'm finding that it's also just so connecting. It's it's what Brene Brown has taught the world, that shame thrives in secrecy, and when you speak the pain out loud, just all just that little thing all by itself is enough to just relax the shame a little bit. And so much of the pain that I have had around faith crisis, I think, has been connected to shame. So
Mm.
so it started sort of slowly, and then by maybe 2021 it had kind of become a weekly experience. And basically we just started inviting everyone that we wanted to talk to, like authors and speakers and thinkers, anyone whose work was already enriching our life. We would have conversations with, and it's been such a gift. And somehow it's been 5 years. So
Wow.
Mm.
Congratulations. That is,
Yeah.
I
oh,
mean,
thank you.
we know now how much work podcast takes. So congratulations. Really quickly, I was listening to NPR yesterday, and news right now is so combative, and I most of the time just turn it off because it's too much with politics and stuff. It's just too much. But this lady on there was saying, and I feel like this relates to religion as well. She said, just take a minute and think to yourself, what if I'm wrong? And it's stuck with me ever since she said it. And I've thought about it with politics, with religion, with friendships, and anyway. So yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I totally agree. We're preparing to interview Arthur Brooks tomorrow, so maybe when this comes out, that will be finished. But he just
Awesome.
wrote this really amazing book with Oprah, and it's
Oh
all
my
about
gosh.
just building a life of happiness. And he sort of brings like the science background, and Oprah brings a lot of these amazing stories from all her years telling stories and being told stories. And but one thing, that's what he says, like it feels like at the end of the day, humility matters as much as anything. Like if you just have this ounce of like, maybe I don't actually know, then like the whole world just opens up. And it's so interesting. I think in the church especially, and I don't know, I'm sure this is true of all faith traditions, but I think there's a way you can look at your own faith and frame it in your mind to believe that you have all the answers, and that humility actually looks like uncertainty, and so that can be kind of threatening. And I think calling it humility really, it I feel like it sort of opens up this opportunity to be curious without feeling like you're betraying what you love. And I think I just needed it to be framed that way, because for so long I equated humility with basically a lack of faith. And I don't think that's what it was. I think that amount of uncertainty, I mean, humility is probably, it probably requires a little bit of uncertainty, right? And I feel like having a little uncertainty has been such a gift, because all of a sudden the world comes alive with the ways that other people connect to God. And like, what a gift is that? Like, I can keep all the things that are mine and that I love, and I can keep my very Mormon way of reaching for God. But it's such a gift to have a little bit of uncertainty that keeps me asking, like, how do other people connect to God, and what actually might enrich my life? Like, what can I genuinely learn from them, as opposed to this paradigm that I have everything to give and they have everything to receive and to learn. So yeah, I think I want that to be a bigger part of my life, because humility and uncertainty has only brought good fruit for me.
Mm. It's so interesting that you mentioned the way that people connect with God as well. I didn't prepare you for this question, but I woke up this morning and I was like, I have to ask her this question.
Oh,
I love to ask people what their connection is to a higher power or to God. And I one time was speaking to some people, and And so I asked all of the people that I could think of, like all of my really close friends and family members, what their connection to God or Christ or a higher power is. And a lot of the people actually didn't really believe in a higher power. A few of them did believe in a higher power, but it looked really different than mine. And it was so valuable to receive the answers and to connect with these people on such a deeper level than I've ever connected with them. And it was like my mom and my sister and my brother, and just a question I never asked them, you know. And a lot of people had left the church recently, and it was very fresh, and didn't know if they believed in God, but their answers were so beautiful and so different. And so I just love to ask this question to people, and we used to ask it more on this podcast, and we haven't for a while. So I just kind of want to know, what is your connection? What does your connection to God look like, and who is God to you?
Oh,
No pressure. That's a big one.
I think I feel the most connected to God when I guess one way to put it is when I'm feeling most vulnerable. Like, I think faith before faith crisis looked like when I was the star student, I felt very close to God. You know, when I was like just nailing everything I was trying to do, like I felt like I had been to the temple enough and I had studied my scriptures hard enough and I'd had some insights that felt valuable. Like those were all ways to sort of like earn this badge that meant that 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 I was in God's good graces. And it almost feels like the relearning that I've done since faith crisis is that I feel the most loved when I'm like the biggest mess. Like the thing I would want to hide most from God, that's where I feel the most held. And so a lot of times it looks like it feels wordless. Like I don't even think I can explain it because it just is this deep sense of being loved in all of the brokenness. And so it's when I feel like I'm really failing, or when I feel like I have no idea what I'm even trying to do or should do, and I just feel like very lost and nervous, and all of the wounds from my whole life feel especially activated. I think feeling this sense of acceptance and just like okayness, that's the closest thing that I can describe as God's love. And I think maybe I just like got lost in all the language that is probably a very good way to describe a God's love. Things like unconditional and charity, and like those are probably all useful words, but I think that I've had to find new language because I stopped being able to hear them for what they really should mean. And so for me, a God like love just feels like the deepest acceptance, where like there's just not even an agenda. It's just like whatever you're doing right now is just, I'm like delighted by you. Yeah, I think that's how it's changed. And maybe the most valuable change that's created in my life is that like the checklist just feels sort of irrelevant. It just feels like what I'm working on now is good. If right now prayer feels more true to me, or feels more like it's making my soul feel warm, to be in contemplation, like to be still and to be quiet, or to be walking, I, instead of feeling like this nervousness about like, does this count as prayer, or like, did I get the 5 things that I should say in a prayer, just like I feel held in my effort, just this constant flow of love, that like my intention is good and my soul is good, and that there's really nothing I could do that would take me outside of like deep acceptance and not just acceptance, but like really genuine delight. Like I that feels more real to me, maybe just because there's baggage with a lot of love words for me around God that are associated with shame, but I feel like God genuinely delights in what I decide to do, and that feels like the closest thing to what I think I was always trying to articulate about unconditional love. But yeah, and even now I don't feel like I can do that perfectly, but that's a closer articulation than what I think I was going for before doubt.
So beautiful.
I'm cried. I've got teary multiple times. It's going to show up on the footage. I love what you said about like feeling God in the pain and the vulnerability because, oh man, I'm going to get emotional, but it just reminded me of a time when I did feel shame. And so I just remember feeling like I had God at like an arm's length. Not that I didn't believe in God anymore or like anything like that, but I just remember being like, I do not deserve this. And I had it at like an arm's length. And I just remember when I finally let it go, it like was the biggest, I mean, it was a physical feeling.
Yeah.
And I think about that now as because I'm always trying to think about my heavenly parents as parents. I think we don't do that enough. We think of God as this like untouchable, off in the clouds, you know, and I try not to do that anymore because, like, if I'm hurting, I'll go to my mom and dad still. At
Yeah.
32 years old, I'll still go to my mom and dad. And if my kids were hurting, I would hope that they would come to me too. So I just love what you said. I think that is like such an important part of spirituality that we sometimes forget about. We put that wall up, that distance, or we try to pretend that we're perfect and that we shouldn't have struggles when think of any good movie. Any good movie without some conflict is not a good movie. You know? Life is like a movie in some ways. We're going to have the conflict and then we'll have the climax and they go together. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that. I think
That's beautiful.
I remember this like this epiphany once that I knew I was like early when I for me first faith crisis was really about the church, not so much about God. That came in sort of like its second wave all by itself. But in the beginning when I was really just grappling with I don't the nature of God, I I realized that the way I had defined God, I actually knew people who were a better like better humans than God. Like I knew people who were better parents
Mm.
than the God that I had imagined. Like
mm,
I had imagined this like constant this very conditionally loving God. And I thought, you know, because it's God, it must be called unconditional, but what I imagined was that you were always just earning your way into God's presence. And I just realized like I know people who are such loving parents who wouldn't make you do that. You know, as a kid, like they
mhm.
wouldn't require these this like type this real repentance from their child before they were
Yes.
allowed to comfort and love and like you know I think they would go to their kids when they're in that really dark place when they're just like beyond even being able to make a good choice to choose to come back. Like I know people who like go out to their kids and just wrap them up when they're at their absolute lowest and I realized well all at once one day like that is insane. Like these people are more loving than God. Like, and of course,
Yeah.
like it broke my heart open in the best way. And I think until then, I had been disturbed by that dissonance before, but I had always explained it like I don't understand, and God knows what's best for your soul. And finally, it just felt like that dissonance was too much, and I just decided I don't believe in a God that would seem like a really unloving parent in real life. You know, like we're trying to be like this perfect being, and I feel this a transcendent love when I see parents, you know, reach out when the kid didn't deserve it. Like when they've just been when the kid has made so many awful decisions that like there's just the parents should give up and they don't. Like the every time you hear a story like that, it just like it fills you up and I think that I think that's our soul recognizing like this is God's love. This is what it feels like to just you there's nothing you could do to run away from it. And I had just created something else that was very human that I was calling God. And it was that was a helpful part of deconstructing some things that were really problematic. And I think that's probably for me why I needed faith crisis. I think it might have been the only way to like reorient this very broken idea that I had about what God is.
Mhm.
Oh,
I really resonate with the idea of not having it be a checklist to like, okay, I prayed to God twice today. Check, you know?
mhm.
And that just feels so rigid to me. I'm definitely not my soul isn't that rigid. And so I always did that. I did the checklists, but sometimes it withheld some of my spirituality, like it held it back. And so I think also there are a lot of people that really struggle if they didn't have a parent, like if they didn't, I've heard a lot of people talk about men, like having issues with men. And so God to them is this, this human figure that is so difficult for them to kind of wrap their mind around. I also recently, we went to a Heavenly Mother or a fireside, and there was this adorable girl that talked about her mother and having really big struggles with her mother. And so it was really hard for her to picture a Heavenly Mother that was completely loving as well. And I think like after interviewing all of these different faiths, and they all have a little bit of a different take on who God is as a whole, like as an entire religion. And so it's really made me step back and think, like, who is God to me? Like, who really is God? And I do believe in a Heavenly Father and a Heavenly Mother. I believe that they are intertwined completely. But I also, it is hard to imagine them as imperfect people because they're not. And yet we're created in their image. So for me, it's easiest for me to think of them as actual love. Like, and if they are love, then we can fill them whenever we want to fill them. And when we feel love, that's them in our life, and that's their presence with us, So I think it's okay for all of us to kind of have a different picture of God and it not be a traditional view or fit the mold, but to be so personal. I really love that when I interviewed all of those people, it was so different. Even the people that didn't believe in a traditional, um, like being, and some of them it was, I actually believe in a power within myself. Like that is still God. That is still love. And if, to me, God is love. So to me, that's still God. And that's still a spiritual presence in your life,
Yeah. I remember, I'm trying to remember which Richard Rohr book it is. I think it's probably The Universal Christ. But I remember him, man, I wish I could remember for sure, but I think it's Universal Christ, where he talks about that God doesn't care if you call it soccer. That God is just wanting to awaken this like deep, just all like a love that fills your whole life. And if you connect to it in the woods, awesome. Like if you connect to it by having this like crazy passion for a sport, like that'll work. Like God can work with anything. And I think that was actually the point that Richard Rohr that you just made. I think that's the point that Richard Rohr is making, that it's like find the thing that lights up your soul, because God can work with any avenue. And so I think that's probably, parents, these very like these, I love like seeing heavenly parent art, but definitely a lot of the images don't resonate with what I imagine, and maybe just because they're so particular, and they're like there's a hair color and like they're wearing clothes that have color, like there's just weird stuff that you probably it wasn't in your mind. But I think it's so interesting and so useful to just to find something that works for you. And I also think that's why it's helpful to learn about other faith traditions, because they're very often capitalizing on something that I have maybe de-emphasized or just not really noticed about God that I also believe. And it just seems like the more diverse images and like ideations of God that we can be aware of, the more we're able to um, notice in our own life these characteristics of a God that we do believe in. And I think we're just all emphasizing different things that have been really emphasized in our own life. So I think it's just I love that question, and I love seeing the way other people imagine God, because I think we're probably all a little bit right and we're probably all a little bit wrong, but it's so useful to just expand our understanding.
And I think even if it's wrong, like it still works for you in your earthly life at this moment,
Totally.
Like whatever works for you to connect
Yeah.
with a higher power, to connect with yourself, to connect with your own spirituality, to connect with other people. Like I think that's the goal at the moment,
Totally.
for
Yeah.
me
Yep.
anyway. That's the
Yep.
goal at the moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a quote that's like, I can't remember where I heard this, but it's another mantra that's been on my mind, is like, do not sacrifice your inner peace for anything. And
Mm.
when I have conversations with friends who maybe one has left the church, maybe one's in the church, maybe one, one's Catholic, maybe, like we cannot sacrifice our inner peace for anything. Like what you guys are saying is like, we're all going to have our own individual connection to the spirit, to our spirituality. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I mean, it feels, in some ways it's like poetry. Like the poem itself may not be, you know, recording an exact event or image or anything that happened in real life, but in a deep way, we can all recognize truth in a poem. And I think that's kind of how I have thought about it more and more often, that, you know, what we actually know is like a pinhole size in the whole sky, and it's complete, like our experience can be completely true, and there can be so much that we don't understand. And so it's anything that can add to our understanding can bring good fruit. And I think you're totally right. Like in our very limited understanding, like that might just be enough. What we do have may be all we need for our whole life. And I think it's helpful to not get bogged down in trying to get so particular that it becomes exclusive or exclusionary, that we start Xing out what we think that means about somebody else's experience with God.
Yeah. I think that's what
Absolutely.
we love so much about interviewing other people of different churches too, because we're not excluding any possibilities. Like it could be anything, I think like we talk about, I actually have talked about this a lot, and I finally found not finally, I just hadn't pinpointed the actual scripture that I've been talking about. But there are so many, like within the church, we talk about other books coming forth in the latter days or whatever. And in 2 Nephi 29, 7-10, and verse 10 especially, it says, "Wherefore, because that ye have a Bible, ye need not suppose that it contains all my words, neither need ye suppose that I have not caused more to be written." And to me, like, maybe that's the Quran, maybe that's the Bhagavad, I can never say
Bhagavad
this.
Gita. Yeah.
Bhagavad Gita. Maybe it's the Apocrypha of, Mary Magdalene and Timothy and all of those additional Apocrypha. Maybe it's the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I think the church kind of qualifies. But I think like probably they're already here, and maybe there's more to come. But I think it's so important not to dismiss them and to learn as much as we can learn. You seem to be so very well read, and I think it's so important too to read not only what encompasses like what we already know and what already validates what we believe and what we want to believe, but to expand our knowledge and reach out to others. And I absolutely love that you guys also interview people, like a variety of people from different faith backgrounds. Explain to our listeners and to us how you approach these diverse conversations and what have you learned from these other religious figures.
Well, I'll just say, early on in the Faith Matters days, I remember hearing a conversation with Randall Paul, and I think it may have been a conversation with Terrell. I think it was like a Faith Matters podcast conversation before we were involved. And he said something about his belief that the Spirit testifies of truth, period. That Moroni's promise is not just about the Book of Mormon, that the Spirit will always testify of truth. And I totally believe that. I believe that that's why when you're in a room and somebody says something really vulnerable at the right time, and and you're in Relief Society, and like it's like that whole energy of the room, just everybody can just like feel like something happens in the room. And I think that's what is happening. Like you're feeling this God love testifying about something that is so deeply true for this person, and you can, it's like the that truthfulness is just electrifying. And I have totally had that experience reading other holy books and talking to people who are talking about their own faith experience. And I think what I love most about it is just hearing my own experience with God told in totally new language, because it's like you have fresh ears and you're able to refine the way you have experienced God, because you're hearing it reflected in a totally new way. And I think they're just, this is just the nature of language, probably, that like you hear the same words over and over, and they can kind of lose the feeling. And when you hear somebody describe an experience connecting with God with without the language that you're used to, I feel like it's bare enough that you just resonate in this exciting way. Like it just, there's no baggage. It's just like raw experience, and I know it. Like I know what they're talking about, and I just love that. I love when that happens, when somebody with totally different language explains their experience with God. So that's like one of my very favorite things. But then also, when we've invited people on and they talk about the texts or yeah, or just like life experiences that have really fed and grown their souls, I feel like very often what happens is that I feel my own heart just get really excited about a new avenue, like something else that will be fruitful for me to learn. And that has sort of been my way forward, like trusting that energy and that excitement and curiosity that feels piqued when somebody is talking. Just trusting that that's a good direction for me, that like there's something fruitful for me in my life that I should just like go after. And so, and I like that, this is something that's really changed since my own faith crisis. I felt like so nervous about, and I felt like I needed to be really careful about what I read, and always felt a little nervous about things that felt different. And that has just completely flipped upside down. Like I love the feeling of excitement about something new. And I feel like that's sort of my soul compass, like that feeling of just, I feel so intensely curious about this thing. And I just trust that that is how the spirit speaks to me now. Like the warmth and the tingling, I think I've had that before, but like for me, I trust that the spirit just, it feels like getting excited about something, and it feels like my feet are moving without my head. It feels like I'm just like already moving this direction, and like I'm just trying to catch up, and I've just stopped shutting that down. And so I love interviewing people who just have a different spiritual well, because it just opens up all of these new avenues to explore. And usually in an interview, there will be something that just sticks, and I just feel like I can't wait to jump off this call and get this book or read this thing or Google something. And I feel like that is how the spirit is moving in my life now. Just this, it's just like energy flowing in all these directions that I didn't even know existed. And consistently that has borne good fruit over and over again.
Oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
I think we feel similarly, but we could never put it into the words you did. You said that so eloquently. Like I'm like, well, the religions are cool. No, just kidding. You said it so like beautifully. Like everything, even down to the referring to it as like energy flow and water at the end. Like that is so true. Like water will get into everything. I love that imagery you put there. That was beautiful.
I love that. I remember at the end of the first year that we did Restore, so 2 years ago, Thomas McConkie did sort of like a closing meditation, and I remember feeling just full, like just brimming with like, I don't know, all good things. Like there was just so much in my mind and in my body. Like it just like I felt like my spirit was just gonna burst. It was such a beautiful connecting experience, and there were just so many good, like amazing messages. So at the same time, I kind of felt like on edge, like I will never remember this. Like I'm not going to be able to keep, and it was like, I think a lot of people were having that experience, and Thomas really intuited that. And he got up to close, and he said, don't, I mean, it was like I had been like unloading on him or something. And it was exactly what I needed to hear. And he just said, don't worry about keeping it all. Like just let it be, and trust that whatever your soul needs is already coming back around. And that will always be true. Like whatever you need, it's already on its way back to you. Like you can't not get it. And I need to believe that. I love it. Like I trust it, that it's true, that the things that I need most just it's like what you just said about water. Like it keeps trickling into your life until you finally like really absorb it. And then the next thing will come. And I trust that most. I mean, that is the thing I trust most about life, that the thing that I need most is on its way already. And it's not going to be about me writing it down in a notebook that I'm not going to lose, or highlighting it, or dog-earing it, or like it's not going to be about like me willpowering this into my memory. It's just, I can trust that life is going to keep bringing me this lesson until until it's really, really sunk in. And And so I think that's the only way I could do the podcast, because I feel that existential overwhelm often. And then this is what I try to remind myself, that it's okay. Like, what's mine is already coming back. Like, I don't have to be in charge of memorizing this incredible conversation and these great points. And I'll trust that my soul will find it again and again and
Yeah.
again until I have it.
I feel that so intensely. And I think, especially in this podcast, which editing is such a pain, but it also can be a blessing because we get to hear it over and
Yes.
over and over
Yep.
again. And we're so excited for Restore, which we will get
Yes.
that. I think we'll be so spiritually fed and enlightened, and just given some topics or some things that maybe we didn't think about,
Yeah.
or we haven't thought about before. And so, like I said, we haven't been before. So tell us a little bit about it and tell us what
Okay.
we can expect.
Thank you so much for asking. I am so excited. I just can't even tell you. Like, this is the third year, and in both years, before I tell you who's coming, because that's a really exciting thing too, but I just have to say, like, I remember the first year, we just didn't even know what to expect. We had no idea. You see how many people are listening to the podcast about, but like, we were having a lot of conversations in little rooms with, one or two other people. And it was hard to imagine that there was this other part of the podcast that was invisible to us, which was the audience. And, and it was just like, it was a life moment I'll never forget. Like, just being in a room with people who felt like really good friends, because we had apparently all been having the most vulnerable conversations together for years. And just, there was this intense feeling of deep connection, because your starting place was so deep already. It was like you knew so much about each other, because you had both found this thing. You had both found these conversations that your soul was lighting up about. And so every single person that we met, it was like I just had this feeling of being life friends. And that was the same experience the next year. Just it was just incredibly healing to be physically in this room with people who are doing the same heavy lifting. And that's the only way I can explain it. Like, that all by itself, like the energy in the room of just being with other humans who know how it feels when it's really hard, and who are excited by the same things that you're talking about. Like, just being in proximity was just exciting. It's an electric feeling in the room to just sit and be together. And so that's my favorite thing about Restore. But then you bring the music and the art and the speakers. And so if you're okay with it, I would love to just tell you a few of the sessions that I'm
Please.
super excited about. And I could go through the whole, all the speakers, because the coolest thing about Restore is that there really is there's no like off session. Like, every single session is a keynote speaker. Like, we decided in the beginning, and we'll see how this plays out in the years to come, but we decided we're just going to keep everybody together, because there's not a session to miss. If you had to choose between two, like, I don't know how you would pick between two people. And so we just do it. You're in the same room all together, and every session is a home run. So that's a really special thing. Like, there, from the very beginning, there's not a session to miss. But one I'm really excited about this year is that Nylan McBain, who she wrote Women at Church exactly 10 years ago, she's coming to talk about women. And this just feels like the topic this year to me. It feels like we've had just like, a couple things throughout the year that have ignited a lot of conversation on this topic. And Nylan is such a powerhouse. And it had already worked out. We knew that she was going to come and do this anniversary conversation about what has changed over the last 10 years with women at church. And so it just felt like the most incredible timing. And she's going to do a presentation about the book and what's changed institutionally. And then she'll bring in Valerie Hammaker of Latter-day Struggles to do a conversation that is more about spirituality and women. And what I love most about both of these women is that every time we've had endless conversations about this topic, and what I really respect about them is that they have seemingly no fear about addressing painful things that are institutional. And I feel like sometimes that can be not enough in the conversation, that it feels like the elephant in the room that everybody's afraid to really talk about. And they are so it feels very empowering to me that they're totally willing to address those things, like those very particular things that are causing pain, that are institutional. And they totally don't believe that that's the entire picture, and that there is this inner work that is really important. And I feel like consistently they do such a good job exploring both of those issues, and it just feels like a full-bodied conversation that has been so healing for me personally, in conversation with them. And I just feel like this is going to be the most incredible session, and I think it's so timely, and I think it's exactly what our community needs right now. So I'm really obviously very excited about this session happening. Another one I'm really excited about is that John Gustav Rathall, who is a gay member of the church who's been married for decades to his husband. He'll be coming to talk about LGBTQ issues with Allison Dayton. So we'll be talking about John's life, and we have this beautiful video that sort of shows in this really artistic documentary style way about his life. And then Allison Dayton from Lift and Love will be coming, and they'll have a conversation about LGBTQ issues in the church. So I love John, and we haven't ever done anything like this at Restore, and I think this is going to be a really special session. So I'm very excited about that. Okay,
Wow.
and then Pete Davis is coming from Boston, I believe. He wrote my favorite book, I think, that I've read this year. Definitely top 3. It's called Dedicated, and it was also one of my very favorite conversations. Like he is so dynamic and interesting, and he wrote this incredible book about why we should stick around and do hard things in imperfect institutions. And he's not a member of the church. He's talking about, he draws on a lot of Robert Putnam's work. On he did Bowling Alone, like all the work about like clubs and like in-person gatherings, just really in decline in the US. But Pete Davis kind of takes on why it's worth sticking around and being a force for good in whatever community you're in, because we need community. So I feel like I mean he has so much wisdom here, and it's interesting to hear him talk from this like outside of the church perspective. Like he's talking to all of us who are clearly like at the edge of inside and really, doing interesting things in our own community, but he is bringing this outsider perspective that is really refreshing, because it doesn't feel like there's an agenda. He's just like,
Right.
this is how I think about community and why it matters. And for
Mm.
me, that took off a lot of the pressure, because it wasn't about like truth claims and what God wants you to do even. And those are questions I am going to wrestle with. But I like that Pete Davis can kind of bring in this totally other perspective, which is like, here's some things to consider about community, period. And like
Mm.
why community by itself is valuable. So I love him. Super excited about that session. And then we'll have a lot of favorites that everybody already knows. Jennifer Finlayson Fife. She's actually publishing a book about sexuality with Faith Matters this year. So she'll be
Oh,
No
wow.
coming to do
way.
an amazing
That's
session about
amazing.
sexuality. David Butler from Don't Miss This will be there this year. And for your audience, I think Michael Wilcox will probably be a big hit. So one of our like top 5 episodes ever, even 3 years later, is still this. It's a 2-part Michael Wilcox episode called God's Many Voices, and he just goes through holy books from other traditions and what he loves about all of them. His career has been
Wow.
in institute, but now he does these amazing tours all over the world. And has just he just has this like genuine love for both our church, the Restoration, and for the religions of the world. And it's so exciting to hear him just weave in things that can be fruitful for all of our lives. Not any, and it's not in an effort to say that we already have this at all. It's just like, look
Right.
at what else is out there, and like, look how this could benefit your life. And yeah, read the Bhagavad Gita, because there are like some amazing things in here. And he introduced all of those books to us. And I mean, it's hard to believe that 3 years ago it wasn't even on my radar. Like we didn't own any of these books, and it has completely changed our life. That single conversation. And now these books are are so important to us and genuinely part of our life. So he's going to come. He wasn't able to come last year because he's always traveling, but he's here this year, and he's going to do a whole session about God's voice. And he's making, was it Emily that you that made the point that like God, he talks a lot about this, that like God's voice will always find a way. And so it could be through poetry or literature or holy books of any tradition, but of course God is speaking to everybody everywhere all the time. And so that's what he'll be talking about. Okay. There's so many more. I can't not say.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
amazing.
we're
No,
at the
keep them
speakers.
coming.
There,
Yeah.
there are so many. Can I just tell you one music thing that I am losing my mind over because I'm so excited?
Yes.
And I don't even think we haven't even announced this officially yet, but Jordan Smith, who was on The Voice, is coming this year to do music. And
No
that felt like
way.
such a long shot. And I'm so excited. He is just my favorite and going to be so incredible. So he's performing this
incredible.
year. Yes. And then Emma
Oh
Nissen
my
will be back
gosh.
doing music. She was here last year and just brought the house down. She was so amazing. But this is also, and I should mention this for anyone who hasn't been to Restore, one of the funnest things about Restore is that we really do have incredible music going the whole time. Like you're in for a session and you hear this amazing message, and then you just get slammed by the most amazing musical experiences, like being at a concert too. So it's such a special day. It's so, I mean, 2 days. It's just full to the brim. You'll be totally exhausted by Sunday, but in the best way. It'll fill your soul. And I feel like there's something for everybody. And this is maybe, I just want to mention this because I think this is probably what a lot of people are wondering. I think if you came with your family and you have some of your family who are very orthodox, have never experienced faith crisis, just want to, like, they're already fed at church on Sunday, they're going to come to Restore and feel totally uplifted and safe, and they're not going to feel like there's anything edgy or critical happening that would make them uncomfortable. Like this is an experience that is so uplifting and will totally feed their soul. And if you have experienced faith crisis and you are not even sure what you believe anymore, and you're really worried that maybe you should leave the church because you feel like an outsider in your ward every single week and you're in a lot of active pain, you will come to Restore and feel so held. Like you will feel like you are loved and like you belong, and you will feel your scariest questions addressed in a way that feels grounded and open and not full of fear. And that's really important to all of us, that you're going to get some of all of that. And so you can come with your whole family and trust that everybody is safe there. And then I just also want to mention, this year we're doing something really special on the evening of Friday. So so Friday day there's a whole, like, the whole day is a session, and then Saturday day there's a whole session. On Thursday you can come early and just kind of like talk to the Faith Matters team, get all checked in. You can look at the incredible art show. I don't know how I haven't said the art yet, because that's probably what people talk about first about Restore. We have the biggest Latter-day Saint art show that I think last year it literally was the biggest ever. And this is all art that has been curated for Restore. So these are like the images that reflect the messages that you're hearing. And you guys, it like, you need an hour to just walk through and have that experience quietly. Like you'll see Heavenly Mother art, you'll see art reflecting that experience of being on the edge of inside. You'll see so many images that have to do with what you'll hear during the day. It's hard to describe. And a lot of the artists will also be there that you'll be able to meet. And then there are like the Faith Matters books and other books that if you listen to Faith Matters you probably are interested in, will be out in the foyer for sale. Okay, so that's Thursday night reception, and the art show will be going the whole weekend. And then on Friday we're doing a special program that was specifically planned with young adults in mind, but you won't get locked out. And it's called Winding Paths to God. And this will be a totally different experience. Like this is sort of just like another way to access that feeling of connection. And it will look like a lot of music, dance, even. There's a short play, stories, and music. Did I say music? Yeah, obviously music. So that will be that will be its own really interesting thing, and will take place in the evening after that Friday session. Okay, what else am I forgetting? Just meet and greets. There will be a lot of opportunities this year to actually meet the speakers and to meet podcast guests that you've liked and authors of the books. So we are really careful. We curate a vendor room of people who are sort of in these circles, who are doing good things, who we think the audience might be interested in. So it's not like a regular conference where everybody's selling something. These are people that we have that we feel like are on this spectrum of doing interesting things in faith or faith adjacent. And so it's really fun to just wander around and find out about what people are up to. And it's also a great opportunity to just meet people who live, who may be your neighbors, like people who are on this journey and you had no idea, and they're in your stake or in your ward or your neighborhood, and you can just really make connections. So I feel like that's the most I feel like that's the thing I love most about Restore every year, is just seeing a familiar face and being like, what? Like, I didn't know that you were reading these books and asking these questions, and it's an easy way to find people that you really connect and resonate with. So anyway, and for your audience, I don't know if you mentioned this already, but we have a code for your audience if you want to put that somewhere. So it's just That's Church will get anybody 20% off.
Yeah.
We're so happy about that.
And
very excited.
Wow, amazing. Like, it's going to be so incredible.
Yeah.
Such important topics. Like, I am so excited because these are topics that I think a lot of people are afraid to address or afraid to even look at. And so I think it's so valuable. We will actually be at the meet and greet. We will have a table, I believe. We talked with Zach Davis.
Great. That's
and
great.
We should have a table for our listeners as well, and anyone that wants to come and chat with us. So we're really excited about that.
That's
and
awesome.
Also, you didn't mention that you and Tim Chaves will be speaking as well. I'm so excited.
We'll be sort of
Right?
We'll be emceeing and welcoming, and we'll be around the whole time. So
okay,
so
I was so excited to see that. And in one of your recent episodes, you mentioned that you don't like public speaking, and you're so articulate and so great at speaking. And so it was so endearing to hear that. I was like, oh that's my gosh, so nice. I love that. And then you're also going to be speaking at this. So I love it, which makes me even more excited and like close to you. I think most people that can relate,
Yes,
and
totally.
and it just makes you feel more real and genuine. So
that's so
I loved hearing that. I was like, really?
Oh my gosh.
How could that be? Because you're so great at speaking and so articulate.
Oh my gosh.
So
that will be what I try to have in my mind before I get awkward on stage. That's so kind.
It'll be so great.
It all sounds so amazing. Like, you guys have covered all of the bases. I'm so excited for all the speakers, but I love music and art. So like, I will be there for those things.
I'm so glad. Poetry. I didn't even mention
so excited.
We'll have short poetry readings in between several sessions. And it's just, we're really hoping to make sure that there really is something for everybody. I think I don't remember who brought it up, but I think we all connect to God a little differently, right? Like, sometimes you connect by sitting next to somebody and having a really heartfelt conversation. And some people, I think, are very much in their head, but that's how they're getting there, like, let's like talk about statistics and like talk and ask the questions and answer the questions. And like, I go there, like that's important to me. But I think also all of us can feel our souls light up about art, with music and poetry and visual arts. Like, all of these, I think all of those experiences help us to make that connection to God. And I should have mentioned, one of the other really cool things is that we'll have there will be a contemplation room that's set up the whole weekend. So last year, I can tell you what last year is. This year it will be different, and you'll have to come see how. But last year, this is, so the Hamish Saint Stephen is who put this together for us, and he did such a beautiful job. He brought dozens of banana trees, like giant, like 6 or 7 foot tall banana trees, and filled this room, and the lights were down, and there were rugs and cozy places to be, and it just felt like you walked into a forest. in the
Oh
middle
my
of
gosh.
the expo center, and and there was soft music playing, and you could all week long people would just kind of sneak in there and take their shoes off and sit somewhere quiet and just have some peace. And so this year
Oh
you'll be
my
able to do
gosh.
guided meditations by Thomas McConkie in that room. But we'll have it will be different and new, but we'll have a contemplation space again, which is just I feel like whatever you need, you'll be able to find, and hopefully whatever your way of connecting is, that you'll have plenty of it, and hopefully some new experiences too.
Wow. It sounds like a haven, like, and so
Mhm.
safe. I'm so, it feels so safe and
Yeah.
special
Yeah. Thank
and
you.
just
Yeah.
real, like, and just like you really, really care about people no
Oh,
matter where they're at, wherever they're at, you know? I
yes.
think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
really
I love that you
Thank
important.
said
you. Yes.
everyone is welcome. That's huge.
Yes.
And that everyone should feel comfortable.
If it's okay, can I just tell you one
Yeah,
story from last year?
Oh, for sure. Yes,
please.
Actually, this is
please.
from the first year. This is from the very first year. So the first year, Brian McLaren, who's one of our favorite people, he came and spoke at Restore, and he was talking about his book Faith After Doubt, and the concept of stages of faith, and Tim and I knew we were going to jump up on stage after his presentation to do like sort of a mini live podcast and ask him some questions. And so, but we didn't know what he was going to present on. So we're literally like, just listening and taking notes and jotting down some questions to ask him as the follow-up when his session ended on stage. And the biggest, most obvious question to both of us was like, how do you create a stage for church? So in Brian McLaren's model, he has 4 different stages. So simplicity, which is kind of that stage that we talked about, where your faith is simple and kind of black and white, and then you very often people have this experience of moving into what he calls complexity, where it gets a little bit more complicated, but there are explanations and it just requires a little bit more digging. And then you might have this experience of perplexity where the whole world falls apart and you lose it all and you aren't sure what you believe. And it feels like you're kind of in a free fall and maybe sad or experience a lot of anger. And then he says a stage that he calls harmony, which is where you sort of can integrate all of the stages again and feel, um, I don't know that he would say that you feel more peace, but you definitely feel like you can accept all these little parts of yourself that are moving through these faith stages. And so to me the question was like, okay, let's do harmony. And like how do we have a harmony ward? Because that sounds awesome and easy.
Yes.
And right before we got
Mhm.
up, he said, he's like literally second, like we're getting ready to stand up, and that's our thing, like let's talk about this, like tell us how do we do this. And he said that the goal is actually not to create a stage for church where everyone's in harmony, but actually to create a 4-stage church where every single stage is valued and loved and respected and and is wanted. And it just like
Wow.
it just blew my mind for a minute, and we just walked up stage on stage in sort of like this daze, like wait a second, like wow, like that completely changes how I've been thinking about this. Like I just can't stop thinking, like, wouldn't it be great if we were all in the same faith stage? It'd just be so much easier, and let's just like get all on the same page. And the case he made is that this is what growth looks like. We need the friction of every stage, and everybody does. Everybody needs the
Yeah.
friction, and there really is genuinely not a right answer here. Like you're on your own very windy, narrow path, and so is everybody else, and they could be doing it exactly right, and you could be doing it exactly right, and you both are on totally different pages. And it just, I think we've kept that advice really in mind ever since. That our goal at Restore is not to talk anybody into a different stage of faith. This is just about ministering to a 4-stage church, and that means you come exactly where you are and and be fed. And there's not a wrong way. I think when you can be honest about your faith stage, a lot of opportunities open up. And so if we can dispel some of the shame about wherever you are, I think that would be very productive work. But it's certainly not about moving you into a different stage. I think it's about all of us recognizing the gifts of the stage that we're in and stretching exactly where we are.
Mm.
I love
Absolutely.
that so much. I
I
have
love
felt
it.
that like within a stage that I've been in. I've talked with somebody that has kind of surpassed that stage and gotten to the next stage and felt like, oh, they must think I'm dot dot dot
Mhm.
because I'm not where they are. But
Yeah.
actually they get it. Like
Yeah.
they actually were where I am at a different time. And maybe it wasn't exactly the same because we're different people,
Yeah.
but I think yeah, there is so much shame around all of it. And I
Yeah.
love that this conference is about kind of dispelling that shame wherever you're at. And
Yeah.
it's such a beautiful thought. And you're it's not just a thought, like you're putting that into reality and making it happen and loving people where they're at. And it's so
Oh,
important.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
And you guys, you have done such an amazing job of walking that line of really accepting everyone. We try so hard to do that here on this podcast. We want people, that are more orthodox and that are struggling and that have just recently left the church. And it can be hard sometimes to walk that line and make sure that people know that they are invited and that they are
Yeah.
loved and that we want them here, no matter where they're at and who they are.
Yeah.
So you've done a really amazing job at that, and we
Thank
really
you.
commend it.
Right. Thank
I
you. It just feels like it feels like an aspect of community that we can't avoid anywhere, right? Like if
Mhm.
in
right.
politics, in where you live, in your school, like it just,
Mm.
that's always going to be the case, that we just don't ever have enough information to decide if someone is right or wrong, you know? And
Yeah.
if we could feel curiosity instead of judgment, I think there would be so much peace in community and they could be such fruitful places. But I think we have to figure out how to live in the tension of not being the same. And so it's always the
Mm.
hard thing. It's the hard thing and it's the gift.
Yes. Oh, yes. Amen. I I can't remember where I heard this quote. I feel bad, but um it was that we mistake unity for uniformity, and
Oh my gosh.
it
Yeah.
it feels like you guys
Yeah.
are like the epitome of trying to find
Oh,
unity, and
oh,
that is, it's so important for our state, for our religion, and for everything. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. That is certainly an explicit intention that we're always really thinking about. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just mention one more thing about Restore
Sure.
really quickly? Because we don't talk about this a lot and I want to. It
Yeah.
is also really important to us that nobody skips, like anybody who wants to go to Restore can go to Restore. And if it's about the price of the ticket, then please reach out, because we have so many generous donors who have purchased tickets so that we can give them away freely if somebody really just, if it's just not going to work inside your budget. I did not understand when we started planning these events how they could possibly cost as much as they cost. In fact, I remember like our very first conversation, I was like, why can't this be like a, I don't know, like 10, 15, $20 ticket? There's so many of us, like we're all throwing it in the same pot. Like how could it possibly cost this much? And
Yeah.
I will just tell you, we lose money on Restore every year. And a lot of this, it's our gift, right? Like it's our gift to the community, and we don't want to price anybody out of this experience. But it's a really expensive event to put on. And so we have tried to not raise ticket prices at all. We've kept them absolutely as low as possible, and then we're just making up the difference. So I just don't want anybody to have the impression that this is like some sort of Faith Matters money making scheme. Like it is genuinely a gift, and we want this to happen, and we're gonna cover the difference. But if even then, I know like the ticket itself is still a big ask. So if you're just not in a position to make that work and you want to go, all it takes is an email. Like please reach out and we will find
Mm.
you a ticket. So I hope people know that and aren't, counting themselves out, because it's a lot of money, especially if you're bringing multiple people in your family. So we get that and want to make it work.
That is awesome. It just gets better and better. We kind of have a last segment that's a little
Oh,
bit
go ahead. Okay.
silly.
It's
And
time.
we but well, first sorry, before we go there, I just want to
Okay.
make sure you don't have anything else that you want to share with us before we ask
Oh,
you our
that's
last
so kind.
question.
I think I think I've talked your ear off. I think we've gotten to everything.
Oh, I
Okay.
love it. We
It's
could
been
talk for
incredible.
hours.
Ashley, why don't you ask that last question
Okay.
actually? Sorry.
So, for
Okay.
this fun little last question, we always ask our guests, you can either share an embarrassing moment with us,
Okay.
and or answer this fun question. The question is, I can't remember it, Emmy.
Okay. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Oh,
That's it.
Oh. I would talk to animals, but I have a great embarrassing moment. I have a handful of great embarrassing
I
moments.
like
So I'll
Talk
tell
that.
you
to
one of those
animals.
too.
I love that. Sorry,
Yeah,
that's
let's
amazing.
not move on from that though. Why?
Okay.
Why is that?
I didn't think
Why
of
is that your
Oh,
thing?
I
I
don't
love
know. I
that.
think that's always been my wish since I was little. I
that
I
is
had
the
a
cutest thing. I
zoo, a
love it.
small zoo growing up. I'm the only one in my family, but I don't know. I just have always felt very connected to little critters. And since I was, I don't know, maybe 8, I've had like dozens and dozens of little critters in my room. So my parents always said I could have an actual zoo when I got married, and then that didn't happen, and I have feelings about that. Seems not
You
like
married
a
the wrong guy.
When you get married, moving
Yeah.
on.
That is so funny. Oh my gosh.
That's awesome.
I love
Yeah.
that.
I love that. Isn't that in Encanto? Doesn't the little boy have
Yes.
right?
Yes,
And
that's
get-
Yeah.
true.
Okay.
Yes, living my
Yes,
dream
that's
life.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is cool. My kids always say, I always like speak for my dog, and my kids are always like, "Oh, you know what she's thinking." I mean, yes, I think I do.
You do.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
she
Well,
just
there you
told
go.
me.
I'm
Okay.
pretty sure we're very
I love
connected.
it.
Oh, that's cute. We're all animal lovers here. We just got a
Yeah.
new cat,
You
and
get
it's
it.
literally our newborn at our house.
Oh, how fun.
It's like a
It's
little
the
bit
cutest thing
it's a
and kind
little
of
bit
ugly.
unhealthy how much we love this cat.
Oh, what's
My
its
kids are
name?
doing skin to skin with it. We're just loving it. We are. I'm like,
You were my
this
people.
isn't okay, but we'll
Oh my
continue
gosh.
doing it.
I love it.
Okay,
It's
embarrassing
funny.
I'll tell
moments.
you.
Yes, go.
Okay, embarrassing moment. Okay, so I was shopping and I had a ridiculous pile of clothing in my arms that was very heavy. And I was waiting in line for a dressing room, and this I was next in line. And it was just a busy day, and there were not very many people working at the store. And so this girl came out of the dressing room and her door swung shut too quickly for me to grab it. And I didn't want to get out of line to go track down someone. Like, we hadn't seen employees for a very long time, and I didn't want to leave. And so
Right.
I was like, I'm just gonna get this done. And so I dropped my giant pile of clothes and I shoved it under the door, and then I army crawled because these were especially low doors. Like, it wasn't a duck under, it was like you're on your stomach. And there were like,
Oh my
6 or 7 people behind
gosh.
me, but I was like, I gotta go. I'm just gonna do this. And I got all the way under and ran into 2 feet because that girl was sharing a dressing room with someone else who was still in there and didn't say anything,
Oh my
even when I shoved her with all my clothes, which meant I had to back out, like backward
Oh
army
no.
crawl and gather up my clothes and pull them out from under, and then
Oh
stand
my
back
gosh.
in line until she was finished and
No.
gave
Oh,
me her dressing
you didn't
room
run
in the
away. I
proper
would have
way.
run away at that point.
I think
just
I
would
was
have
like,
run.
it was like embarrassment hangover. I was just like still frozen,
That
just
is
standing
the
there.
best.
I
There
don't
you
think I
go.
heard
Why
the
not
end.
say anything? Why wasn't she saying?
Yeah.
I
She
don't
wanted
know.
you in
It was
there.
probably embarrassment stunned too. Just like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Just
It was
climbing under my door.
So you wait. The end, you
Oh
said you
my
waited till
gosh.
she came out and then
yes.
you could go
And
in.
then she let me go.
Okay.
Yeah. It was really
That is
she's probably
so.
yeah. I'm sure she's telling this story somewhere too, and it's the worst.
Oh
Love
my
that.
gosh.
See, you're human. I love that you're
I
human.
love it.
And
So many people don't
So
share
bad.
their experience too. I'm really glad you did.
yep.
This makes me feel
It was a
better
good
about my
one.
own life.
Yep.
Oh, it was
You're
not.
in now. You can be our
You know
friend.
it's bad when it's like you can't talk about it for like 3 hours. It was
Oh,
just too bad.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
Yeah.
here we go. Everyone knows.
I have quite a few I still haven't said out loud. Like
Oh,
they're
really?
just way too bad. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
maybe to my husband. Well, my husband was present at one of them and we don't speak of it. Like it's just it happened. We both know it happened.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it will never be talked
We
about
should
again.
start
You
another
know when
podcast
they're
and just
bad.
callers. That has to exist. I
Right?
want to listen to that podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Same. That would
We
be
sh-
church for me.
Yeah. We're doing another no, this takes way
Yep.
too much time.
I'm gonna say one thing really quickly because when you said that like you couldn't talk about it for a few days, when we were growing up, our mom had a wraparound skirt and it fell off in church. And you can't just pull that up. You have to wrap it.
And she was talking to the bishop. She was talking
I think it was the bishop and a return
was?
missionary. It was like the
No.
worst situation. And she didn't go back
my
to
God.
church, I think, for 3 weeks. So
Oh,
3 days
I didn't
is
know
not as
that.
bad as 3 weeks.
Oh my gosh, that's really good. That's a
That's
story
funny.
topper. That's like
It's a
I'd
good
rather
one.
crawl under the dressing room. That's really uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Aubrey. We
Yeah,
are so
thank
honored
you.
to have chatted with you. You're absolutely
Oh.
amazing. And we can't wait for the Restore conference. Can you one more
Yay.
time let people know how to register if they haven't already?
Yes. So just go to faithmatters.org/restore. And then if you do coupon code that's church, no apostrophe, just that's church, then you'll get 20% off. But also please email us or go through the contact submission on the website and reach out if you would like us to connect you with a scholarship ticket.
That is incredible
Love
that
it.
you guys do that. It's so
Oh.
impressive and just shows like the intentions of this whole gathering. So
I hope so.
thank you so much for being here. I have gotten chills so many times, teary so many times. Like this really has been church for me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of That's Church. We truly appreciate your support and hope you enjoyed our conversation with Aubrey Chaves. If you haven't already, be sure to follow us on Instagram at That's Church Podcast for the latest updates and more inspiring content. We have some incredible episodes coming up that you won't want to miss. We're featuring 2 amazing women, a mother and daughter duo, who have created a transformative retreat that we have attended ourselves just for women. We are so excited to share that with you. Following that, we'll be diving into a fascinating discussion with Mandy Green about Mary Magdalene. It's so good. Also, don't forget that you can gain access to our locked episodes for just $2.99 a month or $24.99 a year. Your support through these subscriptions means the world to us and helps us continue bringing you these meaningful conversations. As always, remember to keep seeking light in your journey. Until next time, take care and stay connected.